So again, welcome. We're going to try to make this efficient and maybe even gain some time. We've blocked out 2 hours. We're hoping to not use all of that time, although we are here and available for questions. So the one thing I wanted to just say to you, and for if it's not obvious, is that academic affairs and HR, and in particular both, more the business-oriented part as well as the labor part, we meet on a weekly basis. We meet for an hour and a half every Monday and talk about issues that are either arising from the fact that we have a CBA or other kinds of employment and labor issues and where academic affairs crosses with those. So if you have questions, email any one of us, and we'll bring it to that meeting if we don't have an obvious answer, an immediate answer. So it is a team that works to make sure that we're coordinated and answering things that are potentially unique because of the CBAs or things that we just haven't dealt with at the university that are chronic for some reason or another. So just want to let you know that we're here to answer your questions and solve problems and be helpful to you. And then, so this workshop came out of that kind of work that we're doing, and actually this piece of the article came out of work that became clear in the first CBA that we needed to make an exception to the overload, the way overload was described in the first CBA for certain programs, and that list was defined in a first memorandum of understanding and has now been lengthened and memorialized again. And Bill Brady's going to start by talking about what the CBA's requirements are relative to overload and this particular provision. And then Ron and Susan will talk a little bit about how to interpret some of it in terms of the academic affairs perspective. And then Sonia Potter will talk about operationalizing it. So I think if you can save questions, there's pens and paper on your table. Couple things, make sure all of you should have a copy of the article as well as the MOU. If not, we have some more copies here. And then if you could save questions, I think it would be helpful because it may be that your question will be answered by someone in their presentation. And so we don't have to kind of interrupt and go back and forth that way. So just jot down any questions you have, and then we'll definitely have time for any one of us to answer them. Okay? Does that work for you all? Good. Bill.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Brady, Senior Director of Employee and Labor Relations down in HR. I was the poor guy that got the joy of negotiating our collective bargaining agreement with our faculty union. I see actually three of my co-criminals here with me. Bruce Blonigan, Stephanie Bosnick, and Sonia Potter were all on the team as well. So I want to give you a little bit of a background of how we got to where we are, because I think it's helpful to understand how the evolution of this article came about during negotiations, because it kind of it will help you understand kind of where we're at and why we're here. So as Jane mentioned, under the first collective bargaining agreement, it was agreed at the table that overload would be done on an FTE basis. And what we immediately realized after getting all of that in place is for many of the programs that you run, this is problematic if we have varying base salaries of our faculty. So you have a faculty member who's making $180,000 and you have a faculty member who's making $65,000. Paying them the same FTE, all of a sudden you are paying vastly different amounts for the same exact program. Many of them are teaching essentially side by side and they're getting a hugely different amount. We also realized pretty early on that for some of our faculty members who are at the higher salary ranges, it is actually more than what you would normally pay for your programs. So giving them an FTE assignment off of their base salary that they currently have during the academic year would be very problematic, and you might actually have to decline their assistance and decline them participating in your program because you couldn't afford it. Many of you already have kind of a set amount that you pay for your various different programs. So this was something that was addressed via a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. Academic Affairs went to the union and said, hey, this is a concern of ours. For these particular programs, can we pay a lump sum? And the union agreed. They understood the value of the programs that each one of you represent. They understand the unique nature of the funding model that you all use. They got it. They agreed to the MOU, and everything was fine. We get to bargaining, and this year, and we thought, well, it's really important to us that we actually enshrine that MOU in the agreement so that we don't have to keep renegotiating this MOU every year. So let's just get it in the agreement. it was actually one of the very first things that we agreed to at the table. We agreed to this very early on in bargaining. We agreed at the table that we would be able to communicate the tentative agreement out even before the rest of bargaining was complete. We were also able to expand the list, because when I went to the academic leadership team and said, hey, this is the list we had from our last MOU, are there any other programs that needed to be included? All of a sudden, oh yeah, we have this other program that's actually, we have a similar funding model we'd like to be able to do this for. We were able to expand the list. So now, as you see in your Article 17 there at the table, it's a relatively robust list. Then, as always is in bargaining, there was a little wrinkle. There's always a wrinkle. And the wrinkle at the table was this. We had at the table a part-time faculty member who's a great guy, but he was below 0.5. And he had been engaged in a lot of these type of programs. And it came to the faculty union's attention that he's engaged in all these programs and he's not actually getting FTE credit for it, for purposes of benefits or for purposes of promotion, because we all know that our promotion is based off of, for our non-tenure track faculty, there's a certain amount of FTE that you have to have each year. This was a real concern from the union. And when the administrative team took it back and we had discussions, we realized, boy, this is a problem, because they are engaged in work for the university. This is all bringing value to the students. It's bringing value to the academic experience of the university, and yet we're not really giving them full credit. I mean, we're compensating them, but particularly when it's kind of for our part-time faculty members, they're not really getting the full value in terms of their own kind of personnel situation. So we agreed at the table that we were going to remedy that. So that's how the MOU came about. So in Article 17, it's actually pretty straightforward. Article 17 essentially says that, yes, normally overload is compensated on an FTE basis, but these specific programs, because of the unique funding model that they have, we're going to pay them a lump sum or a stipend. So that was pretty straightforward. It got a little bit more complicated when we figured out, all right, well, we're going to pay them a lump sum, but we also want to be able to give them FTE. So how are we going to do this and do it fairly and do it correctly, and also do it in such a way where you're not paying for each one of your individual programs, you're not paying FTE on their base salary, because that goes back to the earlier problem that we had tried to address. Some of you can't afford to pay on their base salary. And many of you would be concerned if you're paying different amounts to different faculty members. So the compromise was reached. It's reflected in your MOU. And I'm going to kind of walk you through it because it's kind of confusing. But I want to at least explain to you, and the purpose of today is to get you understanding what we actually intended and what we were hoping for. So if you go down the first one, typical of MOUs, there's a bunch of legalese, like recitals at the beginning. You can just ignore those. So down in the middle of the page, beginning on line 26, is where we get to the meat and what we really need to discuss today. So the first piece, all faculty who teach classes in the programs listed in Article 17, Section 10, will be assigned a contractual FTE for these assignments. So going forward, everybody will get an FTE for the work that they're doing in your program. So if they teach a FIG, freshman seminar, insight seminar, whatever it may be, they're going to get an FTE for that. Now, frankly, it's only the impact of this is going to be on part-time faculty. That is going to be the significant impact, because frankly, once you're at 1.0, you already have all of your benefits, you have your promotion eligibility. Where this is really going to have the immediate impact is with the part-time faculty, particularly those that are already at a relatively low FTE. Because participation in all of these programs fluctuates, and it fluctuates not just in terms of how many people you have participating, but also who is participating, we actually don't know yet what is going to be the impact of this. We don't know how many folks are going to be in the situation where they're only at 0.2 and they're picking up 2 FIGs. And maybe that's going to put them over 0.3. So this is a year of trying to figure that out and figure out how many people are actually going to be impacted. The second bullet says that faculty members' FTE calculations shall be consistent within the same program. So what we're saying is that as a program, one of the first steps you're going to have to do is figure out what is your particular content worth in terms of workload and FTE. So if you are running FIGs and all the FIGs are essentially the same level of effort, then you need to have consistency across those. If you're running a program that has a 3-hour seminar and you have 80 different faculty members that all teach a 3-hour seminar, they all need to get the same FTE. We're not going to try to mess with FTE levels in order to kind of rig in salaries. Everybody is just going to get within your program for like work is going to get the same FTE. Point 3, payments made pursuant to Article 17, Section 10 may reflect base salaries which differ from the individual faculty member's normal base salary. So each one of you, at the end of the day, will be prepared to create a new base salary for your program that is applicable to the faculty that are working within your program. And here's how we designed it, and this is the intent. And I'm going to use a very easy example because I am math challenged. So let's say that all of you magically got a lot of money and you wanted to pay $10,000 to the faculty member for whatever endeavor you're running. Okay, so great, $10,000. You also decide that based off of normalized workload, and Ron's going to help you kind of think about workload, but that it's going to be worth 0.1. So annual FTE, they teach a FIG, you're going to do 0.1 and you want to give them $10,000. Boom, your base salary is now $100,000 for that. So what we're actually doing, we're giving you the ability to pay a lump sum of your choosing. But once we figure out the FTE, we have to backdoor in a new base salary. That base salary is unrelated to the base salary that the faculty member has around campus. So you can hire that $180,000 faculty member, and you can hire that $65,000 faculty member, and for your program, the base salary is $100,000, and they're getting 0.1, so they're all going to get that 10 grand that you essentially planned as part of your program. So that is the scheme that we have set up in order to allow this to happen. It keeps you on a lump sum basis. It keeps the ability and the flexibility to hire whichever faculty member you want, regardless of what their normal base salary is. So this was the compromise. The most important thing to the union was the FTE, and that this was a way that we could actually get that FTE, and they will get credit for that FTE. Now, the other thing that we wanted to do in order to protect units is 4. And 4 is a lengthy way of saying, wow, if we're going to give credit for them, they have been teaching in all of your programs, and because we are the University of Oregon, and because we are highly decentralized, we may not know who's been doing what. So if they find themselves in a situation where they think they need credit, some additional kind of credit of work in order to be promotion eligible, for example, to meet that 0.3, which is now the new standard under the new collective bargaining agreement per year, because they've only been 0.2, it's their duty to bring it to their department's attention that they have been working in one of your programs. We can't just magically know what programs they've been teaching in because, frankly, we just don't have the records to reflect that. We're not really sure. So what may happen for each one of you that are in charge of one of these programs, you may have department heads or other individuals in the home departments reaching out to you to confirm, hey, 3 years ago, did so-and-so pick up this particular FIG, or did so-and-so work, do an insight seminar, and what is your FTE for that? So I think that that's something you should just be aware of. You may get contacted. Once again, frankly, we don't have a huge amount of faculty that are that low in terms of how much FTE they have in a year that this is going to be a huge difference. But for those 4, 5, 8, 12, 15, it could be very significant in terms of their promotion eligibility. So that's something that we did put in here, but it is their duty to bring it to their department, and their department will need to reach out to each one of your programs to actually verify that that is indeed the case, that they did participate in your program. So that is the overall scheme that we have created. And you're probably thinking, well, there's a lot of nuances. How do we go about setting a base salary? How do we go about setting FTE? How are we going to get all this in our system? Because we all know that that's always a good discussion of how do we get it all in the system. So we have some folks that are going to help you kind of talk about that, and then there's going to be plenty of time for if we need a discussion, if we have questions, or maybe we just want to share some stories about how we think we're going to do it. That's fine, too, because we have a fair amount of time today. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron. Or Susan? Yep, it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah, I'll take it. Is this working? I'm not hearing it. Is it working fine? Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to kind of figure out the base calculations and how to assign workload and FTE. As Bill said, there are basically three components. There's what you want to pay the faculty member for this particular piece of work. There's the FTE that's assigned to that, and then there's the base salary. The amount you want to pay and the FTE need to have some rational basis, and then we'll figure out what the base salary is based on those two things. So probably the first step is to figure out what are we paying for this piece of work, a FIG class or an Insight seminar or whatever that is. What's our lump sum for that? The FTE calculation, again, as I said, has to have some basis in reality in terms of how we think about workload on this campus. So if you are in a unit that has a workload policy that hasn't yet been approved by us but will be soon, that talks about what FTE is for a class, then you would use that as the basis. So I would say probably for more than 80% of our campus, 0.1 per year on an annual 9-month FTE is what a 4-credit class is worth. Okay, so that's not true for every unit, but it's true for most. So whatever kind of the basis is in your unit for establishing FTE for teaching a class is the place to start. If you're not in a unit that has a workload policy or has a basis for that, I would go back to that 0.1 and sort of think about it that way. I mean, that's probably a good starting point. It makes the calculations easy. We're not saying you have to do that, but it's a fairly rational way to think about a course, a 4-credit course. If it's 2 credits or 1 credits, you could prorate it down from that. So that's sort of how we imagine thinking about FTE. The other piece of it to think about, because you'll be, as Sonia will talk about, you'll be delivering some memo of assignment or some agreement about what the assignment is what does that FTE, what's the work contained within that, right? So communicating to the faculty member what the expectation is. So you're going to teach a seminar. We imagine that will entail some preparation, some meeting with students. So what are the kind of pieces of the work involved in this FTE calculation? And I just want to reiterate what Bill said, that the reason the FTE can't be kind of just a random thing is because it has implications for faculty in terms of benefits and promotion eligibility. So we just want to make sure that we're grounding these decisions in the larger context of how we think about workload for faculty. The final piece that I'll add, and we'll send out a communication about this, but we would like for each unit that has these kind of programs to send to academic affairs how you've determined what the FTE is for each of your different activities. If you just have one, we just want you to communicate with us. We're going to count this as 0.1 annual FTE or 0.15 or whatever it might be. So we'll be asking for that. We'll send we'll send a communication, and we'll provide an email address that you can send that to. Susan, do you have anything to add to this? And okay, so in that we'll want the FTE, and then what you're paying, the base salary or the lump sum that they want to pay. Okay, so the FTE and the base salary. Again, we'll communicate this out.
The lump sum will be fine.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Yeah.
I would advocate that you guys have some oversight over it. I think units themselves might get lobbied by faculty members. Like, it would be really great if you did 0.15 or 0.17, because then
right.
Would. And I think people even here would just, someone to make sure that these things, that there's some I don't want you to like be draconian in it, but just so that we know and that people can say, well, listen, I have to write something that, justify something that makes sense with the rest of the university. So I really feel that's, if you guys can play that role of central oversight and just making sure that it's consistent with what other units are doing. Right?
No, it's a great point. That's exactly why we're asking. So we don't want to over-police this. We're not requiring some sort of written approval, but we want you to send it in so we can eyeball it and just sort of make sure we're staying within.
And have conversations with some unit if it looks like they're really out of adjustment with the rest of the university.
And then, but that'll also give you the chance to say, hey, we're doing this is where we feel we can justify it.
Yeah, if they can, sure.
So I think that's also applicable to a program like the FIGS that reaches out to all colleges. FTE base salaries are different everywhere. So how do we work with that type of program and
Right.
a couple others that are very similar to that, that they're campus-wide?
Right.
If we want to be consistent with everybody.
Yeah, so
we do that.
the consistency we're looking for is within the program. So within FIG programs, where FTE will be the same for all of the like activities, and your lump sum payment will be the same for all like activities, regardless of where the person coming in to do that is from. So the consistency basis is within your unit, not within the home unit of the faculty member. So that's the fundamental principle. And then we figure out the base salary, which doesn't have a basis in reality. It's just done to make the math work. Does that make sense?
But that's where she could come and talk to you guys, well, what is everyone else
Yes,
doing? So
right.
you
And
guys
we're
can
happy
make
to
sure
work
there's
with you to
consistency across
figure that out.
units.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Sonia now. She's going to talk a little bit about the kind of logistics of how all this is going to happen, and then we'll have questions and more time.
Bill and Ron kind of stole some of my thunder in talking about FTE calculations or annual rate calculations and a little bit about what we need to turn in to get people set up. So we talked about a memorandum of assignment and or a contract. So depending upon how you've run your program in the past, we would ask that you continue to do it in that similar manner. If you haven't issued either of those, we would ask that there's some sort of memorandum of understanding or memorandum of assignment, I guess is what I should say, for that person so they know what they're doing for the pay that they're receiving. So this is all related to when it's an outload type of situation, but we've already kind of talked about the FTE calculation and backing into the base. Then I think how you would pay it would be two ways. One is if it's somebody that's not full-time, we would set it up in the department on their current position but with a different suffix at the new rate of pay, at the rate of pay that's been decided by that unit. So if it's a FIG, and it's in another academic unit, that person you would set them up on their academic unit position with a different suffix in their main job. So this is all technical, and we can talk about any questions or concerns about that too. If it's a person that's at 1.0, then it would be an overload position. And I would have you just do a PRF on these situations unless you've in the past done contracts. So if you've done contracts in the past, we can talk about any kind of changes to that, but we're a little worried about people getting the same type of documents they've had in the past. So, and when you process whatever documents, just attaching the assignment paper or if it's a contract, it's a contract. We'll have all the documentation there. So I think that's all I had to cover. Is there more questions or? Yeah, Malika. Temp faculty.
Different, well, currently we can.
WTAs, you mean
Yes.
that?
Yes. There's no FTE, there's no salary basis.
That are filling in these programs?
Yes. We have several people that will come and present.
You're talking about not these programs then, right? You're talking about guest lectures and
Yes,
That's-
right.
that's a different
You're
situation,
right.
so.
Okay, so this whole FTE assignment MOU does not impact
Not the
only the
temporary.
programs that are listed here.
Yeah.
So these programs, we have to pay, instead of having to pay overload, be able to pay this way, or just in general, be able to pay a lump sum.
I saw somebody back there.
Yes?
Yeah, so you mentioned with a position that's not full-time, doing a new position with a new suffix. Are you envisioning that on an RTO or a PRF?
It depends on the program. So, and I meant not a new position, the same position that they have in their normal department with a
Okay.
new suffix.
Okay.
So if the program that you're dealing with has previously done RTOs, that's how I would do it. If they haven't, I would do a PRF.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to point out and clarify, maybe I'm wrong on this, but, so if someone's at .4 and then they do a FIG and it's .1, then the home department will end up picking up the benefits that get triggered at .5. I mean, we thought about that at the table, and I think we just said, yeah, well, that's
That's
good.
not necessarily true.
Okay,
I think
that's
it
what I
gets
wanted to ask.
split between where the labor is.
Oh,
Now,
just on the labor distribution side.
Yeah,
we
it
can
hasn't,
pick up.
and
It's not.
it hasn't been doing that? No.
So
But you guys do stipends right
we
now.
do, but we give the funds to the departments to pay out, so there's no labor split on FIG. It's
Okay.
all within that department.
So you give it to the department and then they would do the paperwork to put them
Yeah.
on? Okay.
So,
In that unit, in that program, that's how it's been done.
but in the past, so will then the OPE that is transferred to the department be based on
The full
any increased
FTE.
cost if it puts them over the benefit threshold? Or it used to be that that was incumbent on the.
So currently how it works, before we switch benefit calculations next year.
Yeah, because next year this all goes away.
Right, is that
As far as the benefit issue.
FIG's only funds, I think this year, .32, which is the retirement and other OPE, not medical. So that's been the policy since that program was set up.
So I just
Next
think
year, that will go away, obviously, because the rate will change.
Right.
as long as you understand.
So, yeah, you're correct. Next year, we're thinking that all of these issues, particularly with the medical benefits, are going to go away because of the new way that we're going to be handling OPE. This year, what we'd like you to do is, if we're aware of situations where someone is triggering because of one of your programs, they're triggering that .5, flag them for us. Send me an email, send Sonia an email, send one of us an email, so that we can look into that. We've had discussion with our finance people to say, hey, we agreed to this at the table. We expect that there is going to be some additional cost. But frankly, at this point in time, we're not really sure how many we're dealing with. We don't know if we're dealing with 2 or are we dealing with 20. We just don't know. So what would be very helpful is for you to flag it for us so that we can then take that back and have conversations about what is the most appropriate way to handle those additional costs. We know that some of your programs can't afford them, right? That's kind of the whole point. We get it. We understand that. We also know that there's certain departments that can't afford a whole lot of extra. So we will work through that this year. Luckily, that is a problem that will resolve itself next year. So we're actually very excited by that in a number of different ways. But so if you're aware of that, please let us know so that we can kind of dig deeper and figure out what's going to be the best way to solve that problem. So I think this year, we're going to kind of treat it in just kind of issue spots and just try to solve them as they come up, as opposed to putting forward a blanket rule.
Any other questions? Not just for me, but of others. Yeah, Carrie?
Actually, it's for you.
Okay, great.
So if you're doing the overload forms, do you continue doing that? The overload request forms?
That's a good question.
Well,
Do we want to still have?
I think we
Yeah.
still want to track that because we still need to know, right, we still have some limits around how much over.
Yeah,
So that's
So,
kind of
yes.
separate from
it's, yes. Any other questions?
Did I miss something? There's limits to the overload?
There's as far as how much you can go in overload, typically it's the 1 day and 7 rule out of the conflict of interest policy.
That didn't change?
No, not yet, no. I shouldn't say even not yet. I don't know if it's going to change, so.
For stipends that come across our desk, things that come up across and they could be at a flat rate that aren't on this list, is there a process for, like, who is going to be enforcing them, or if it's a program that, you know, you talk to and they say, well, we don't have, this is how much we told them we were paying them, Like, what do you do in that situation?
So I think it would be good for both Bill and I to know those programs if they do come across, because things like this are popping up in general. As people make new programs and come up with new ideas, it's going to happen. And there is a clause, I think, at the end of that policy that talks about anything like this. So we would want to make sure that that unit is doing these types of calculations and setting FTE.
And not avoiding overload. I mean, so there is an overload provision that was bargained in both contracts, and we have to make, the agreement to have this be an exception for a particular reason, so people can't avoid the regular overload provision by saying, okay, everyone that we're using, we're going to do this way, it has to be approved. And so definitely let them know if somebody is doing that, and if you know of programs in your colleges that are proposing to be set up that way, it better be run through to make sure they can be. That it's not just automatic.
So just to clarify, I mean, overload in the collective bargaining agreement means something slightly different than what it does as meant on campus in the past for us. Overload in the past has been in excess of 1.0. In the contract, the CBA, it's in excess of what their normal workload is. So if they're not full-time and they get an added duty like a freshman seminar or an insight seminar, that's an overload assignment according to the CBA, so we would process it this way. Okay?
So if they drop FTE for a term because they're going to teach a course over here, it's not their normal job, but they're still having normal FTE.
This is inload, and inload's a little bit different how we're handling it.
I was hoping we were actually going to get to the whole thing without talking about inload. All right, so for those of you who do sometimes run your program,
None of this actually applies, okay? This is all for outload. And the reason it doesn't apply is think about what the concept of an inload is. Inload is I am paying you a set salary for a range of duties. I am releasing you from some of those duties to go do something else, and I'm going to pay you the same salary. So what we're really doing in an inload situation is we are swapping out duties. You're not going to teach this course, you're going to go teach that. You're not going to do this research, you're going to go do that. I'm going to let you not have to serve on that committee because you're going to go do that. That is exactly what we're doing. So in that situation, all the old rules apply in terms of whatever calculations you do for the back office exchange of money in order to essentially buy out that faculty member that's still kind of how we're proceeding. It doesn't apply to that because we, from a employee standpoint, they're still getting paid their base salary to do 1.0. And we also know that some faculty or some departments are actually getting a little bit of a sweet deal sometimes, depending on the base salary of their faculty, and sometimes those departments are not getting a sweet deal, and they're actually eating some money depending on the situation and depending on the base salary. But that is completely different. We're going to continue, however it's been done historically, is going to continue with inload. We have rectified some problems in departments that we learned of in terms of some practices with inload. So that has caused a little bit of some irritation by some of our faculty members, but we have cleaned up those processes from a department perspective. But as far as all of your programs, the inload process is still very much the same. Even if they're teaching at a different school or college, essentially what we're doing is it's very similar to when they teach in an interdisciplinary program. We're just swapping out one set of duties for another set of duties. They're still compensated at the same amount. Any other questions? Yes. Okay.
I mean, my whole budget right now, aside from GTS, is about $7,000. And that's money I can use to try to persuade people maybe to develop a course or something like that. But that could possibly be ASA money as well. How does that work in the system? When we try to use it that way?
So nothing in the collective bargaining agreement or in any of these, the new MOU actually precludes us from going the ASA route. So some of you, as kind of part of your history, have offered up funds into faculty members' ASA accounts. That can continue. We actually got a we double checked that last year. We did a review. We did a legal review to make sure that we were still in good shape. We cannot require a faculty member to take funds that way. But that is so if you've always offered that, that continues to be fine. There's nothing in here that precludes that option.
But do stress that you can't require, you can't say, if you're gonna do this, you have to do it as an ASA.
Right.
Because that you can't, if you're offering work, you also have to offer salary with it. And if they prefer an ASA, that's fine.
Okay.
And then you have to make sure you're also, everyone here needs to make sure that they're following the right rules for ASAs, which relate to what is reimbursable. It has to be related to their employment, essentially.
But typically, you could offer.
Yes, and regardless, they still get an FTE credit for that, regardless of whether it's going into an ASA account or if it's going out in cash.
Oh, it has to be.
They have to. That's, I know. I don't know how we'll do that in the system.
And let me just also say, ASA has been used differently on this campus. It can't be an account that gets swept. Because if they've earned this as work, it can't be that you could, it's an, you know, some places sweep accounts after a couple of years if you didn't use as much money or whatever. They would have to make sure, right? Am I correct?
No, you're correct.
That you have to make sure it's an account that they get to keep for, you know, time. Well, I have no idea the answer to that question.
But I mean, essentially,
Has to go to a workshop.
right. The ASA is just an alternative means of compensation, but the underlying principle that they are getting credit for that body of work still remains the same. So, Sandra, you had a question? Maybe? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was about the memo of assignment, memorandum of assignment. Setting aside things that we do that are credit-based would be with a partner academic unit, so we'd have a guideline there from that partner. So I'm focused on non-credit, so it's really hard to make a standardization around non-credit related to FTE, right? So if Bruce comes and does a presentation and we want to give him $500 as part of an executive seminar, the whole point of the lump sum was at a flat amount, but maybe Laura Vandenberg in ARC does an executive seminar and we can only afford to pay her $250, and she says that's great, but they both did half-day seminars.
You will be delighted to hear that academic extension was exempted from the salary article of the collective bargaining agreement. The nature of what you guys do makes it very difficult because you can't actually compare apples to apples all the time because you have apples to oranges to like elephants. So I mean, you have all sorts of different things that run through academic extension. So we try to give you maximum flexibility to actually pay what you need to pay, but we're happy to have further discussions about how to kind of figure all of that out within your world.
To give you some FTE. Okay, thank you.
Yep, yes.
It's very timely for us because for the librarians, we've always done an in-load agreement with any department they work with. We have a case now, however, where we have an employee who's, we reduced her FTE at the library. The home department has decided, the other department has decided they have normalized the salary based on what they want to pay other people who are doing the same work, so now that means for her that she's receiving several $100s or less a month from that assignment that she was initially agreed to or was used to. So from what I'm hearing, if we agree to an in-load assignment with the other department, like they need to pay that rate. Kind of sorry about it, or are they correct in saying, no, we normalized this and they agreed to this other amount of money?
That sounds like a little bit of an odd situation,
It is,
and we might need
yeah.
to talk about it offline, but I will tell you that as an underlying principle, when we were going through the normalization process around campus, if you were going to lower someone's FTE as a result of the normalization process, that also meant that we did a corresponding increase in their base salary so that they remained whole, so that no one actually took less FTE and got paid less for the same body of work. So that was an underlying principle that we used. So if we have a situation where maybe something isn't fully gelling,
Yeah. Okay.
we can have a discussion about that and see if we can fix that. But everyone should be compensated what they have been, yes.
Well, I was going to say, the other underlying principle is that if it's in load, they get paid their normal salary. And we haven't spoken to who pays that, which is part of it.
Correct.
Right, and that is exactly right. So if it is in load, they shouldn't see a change in their paycheck at all. If it's in load, we're already compensating you for all of your in-load work. So it shouldn't actually impact their salary at all. Other questions? Yes?
Since you're speaking of in-load, this is kind of a parallel thing, specifically directed towards advice. And paying faculty members or, not professional advisors, but during the time of breaks. So, everyone's sorry. Yes, so we've received a lot of pushback about, this is my break time, and this is above and beyond what I do. Whereas it's the same work that they do the rest of the.
It is. So we have a new provision of our collective bargaining agreement. I'm sorry. It is in Article 32, which is leaves. Where in the leaves article, there's a discussion of what is actually the paid breaks for faculty. So that is the period of time between Christmas and New Year's, and the period of time of spring break. Those are officially paid work breaks. And we have language in there that if they are assigned to do on-campus work during one of those work breaks, they will be compensated for that. So if because of the nature of your program, whether it's your program or frankly your home academic department, if it's one of those issues, we have to figure out what is actually, whatever they're coming in, like literally we have faculty members who come in for like an hour and sit to see if any of the students are going to come by and drop in for that window of opportunity. We have to figure out what is that hour worth, and we need to give them something to represent that hour. So that was something that I will tell you was agreed to in order to get a global settlement.
So I think the question that we had is, I thought I read in there that if they are eligible for vacation or if they're not eligible for vacation, I can't remember exactly how it's worded, that kind of threw our question in front.
So 9-month faculty have these paid, on paid leave during these breaks, 12-month faculty are eligible for vacation, do not have these paid leave breaks.
Correct. So those paid leave breaks are only for 9-month faculty, and 12-month faculty, because 12-month faculty accrue vacation, we're kind of on a different calendar. We wouldn't have to pay a 12-month faculty in that situation.
You'd approve their vacation or not, depending on, they're either go on vacation.
I wasn't familiar with what 9-month faculty received, so that answers all that.
All right, who's completely confused and wants to run for the building screaming? Anyone? Okay, that's a good
So
sign.
this is all a good thing, right? That there was all negotiation.
So moral of the story, go back, have a discussion within your program to figure out what that FTE is, figure out because you guys have all been running these programs, you know what you pay already. So figure out what that pay is, how do you get that into your FTE, and then ultimately what your base salary is, and then you're going to send that to academic affairs, and there'll be a communication that goes out that kind of summarizes that. That way we know. That also, it helps us with tracking when we're dealing with promotion issues, when we're, whatever it may be, that way we have some knowledge. It will also help us if, once again, if you have folks that are very low on FTE, you're hiring someone and you know, because you're entering them in the system and you know that they're kind of below 0.5 and you think that you're going to put them above 0.5, just flag it for us. Send an email to Sonia and I, that way we can look into it. The other challenge that we have, what's good about that, is that some of them are actually teaching in multiple ones of your program, and sometimes not everybody is able to see what's exactly going in, depending on when it's entered into the system. So if you think you have that situation where you're dealing with someone who looks like they could be on that threshold of becoming benefits eligible, just flag it for us so that we can actually go in, investigate it, and make sure that we're okay.
We had asked you to bring lists today and decided that was not going to work, so that was why. So.
Right, so instead of trying to go through all of your individuals now, it would just be helpful, when you are, just for this year, when you're hiring that individual, when you are bringing that individual on, just let us know if you think that there could be a potential benefits problem, and then that way we can kind of investigate that further. So that's kind of that's the overall scenario of what we have. We hope that this continues to give you the flexibility to pay what you need to pay in order to serve your two goals of A, getting the faculty, so you have to pay enough to get the faculty, but B, also not paying them something that would otherwise shut down your program. So we want these programs to succeed. We want them to be kind of vibrant and very successful, which means that we wanted to craft some kind of scheme that allows you to pay what makes sense for your program based off of your own economic constraints. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to hand it over to Jane because she's reaching for the mic.
So, any last questions? If you leave here and you think, oh, you know what they should do is this, or I forgot to ask that, please tell us, right? So it's not helpful for us if you have
you don't share with us, or questions that you don't share, or confusions that you have that you have after you leave the room or you don't feel comfortable sharing here. So Bill Brady, Ron Bramhill, Susan Anderson, Sonia Potter, Jane Gordon, write to any of us. Or go back to the invitation and Sonia Rumberg will get it to us. Thank you to Sonia Rumberg for arranging this and Gretchen for taping it. And for all of you for coming during very busy times. I know it's always hard to squeeze this kind of stuff in, and we didn't give you a lot of notice, partly because it doesn't seem to matter whether we give a lot of notice or not, getting on your calendars. And eat some more salad if you have time to do so. Thanks for coming.